Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast. Whether you are considering buying your first investment property or reaching property mogul status, we dissect the fundamentals through to large-scale property development and everything in between.
G'day, hey going? It's Phil Tarrant, co-host of Pure Property Podcast, and I sit here when I tune into the introduction music there, and I sort of instantly my mind moves towards how am I going to start this, because I don't really think too much about it before it gets going, and it always, particularly with this podcast, the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop, it sort of seems to orientate itself towards where I'm going to start by giving you a hard time, and I got to start with your new book.
Oh. That's
I'll start with your new book, which I have a copy of.
It's
that
funny,
you gave to me last time, but you didn't sign it. And you know how much I like a signed book.
Well, you'll get that
First
potentially,
edition.
depending on how much of a hard time you give me. You know, I appreciate hard time, so the better the jowls.
But I can't go anywhere on the interweb without seeing it, and it really annoys me.
Well, you might have to turn off social media.
I think I might do.
You might do.
I'm sick of it.
When it turns back on, which you will, you'll see it again. And maybe I'll just go old school. We'll get some billboards going. And
That's what you should do. Why don't you go on back of buses? That's what I want to see.
Back of buses.
Back of buses.
Local agents, the rest of it. No, look, mate, it's the book has since that podcast.
You're going to already tell me it's a bestseller?
No, it's definitely not. But it's moving. It's frustrating some of my team members who are in charge of the distribution component of it.
Oh, they're
all.
sitting there packing books and stuff.
Yeah, there's a bit of that going on. You know yourself, Aaron. There's a bit of a logistical process that goes with all that. But it's been I could say it was a joy to write at particular points in time, but certainly is. I'm glad it's done. Yeah. We talked about children off air for a little bit there, and it's kind of almost like that process to a degree. And once you've kind of let them out.
So you're not going to go again, that's it? Is it going to be a third instalment?
I never say
So when you got pure, what was it, the Service Guide to Property Investment, and then the Service Guide to Property, the next wave?
Riding the next wave.
So when is it going to be like the last wave?
The tsunami.
Tsunami. Or it's going to have to
Dealing
be
with
like
the aftermath.
Cowabunga or somewhere other. But there's got to be something on like, when do you actually start getting into your sort of big wave surfing? Maybe that could be the next book.
Look,
going big or go home.
There is
Eddie
chapters
would
in there
go.
that talk a lot about the big wave surfing component, which is, realistically developments, large-scale changes to more so just the passive investment side. And that's probably the definition of going big and going out the back and taking off on some waves that you're not necessarily that comfortable with. And that's a big part of what we probably want to talk about today if I'm talking about a transition.
And I like doing podcasts because often different sort of worlds or different sort of networks collide, and I think that's certainly the case today. Aaron Christie-David, who's the founder and director of Attilia Wealth. I've known Aaron for 12 or 13 years.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I remember, I probably wasn't the first time we met, but I remember it quite vividly, the Australian Broking Awards in 2011, maybe.
Was that the first one?
It could have been.
Yeah.
I remember standing down at the Overseas Passenger Terminal with you when you're at the Commonwealth Bank, sort of going, this is what we're going to do. And you're sitting there looking really fucking sure. Yeah. No worries. But you had the checkbook at the Commonwealth Bank at the time, so I was obviously trying to curry favour with you. And the Commonwealth Bank was the principal partner of that at that point in time. So you were, I guess, a banker guy for a while, right?
I was marketing it.
A marketing guy at a bank.
Correct.
And now you're a mortgage broker of the studs who also has a book. Everyone's got a book. You can't be in property without a book.
Yeah, no, you can't. And if you are, then you got to ask, who are they?
Well, book and a podcast, I guess. So
book and podcast. It's a well-tried.
And a billboard, as it turns out.
And you need a billboard or a back of buses. But I think you as an author, Aaron, you're probably a bit more smart or erudite than Paul, because you won an award. This is not a big up by anyway, but like, what is it? Something about home loans or something like that? I didn't really take too much notice. I just saw it. I went, oh yeah, cool.
Not all. I don't get carried away. Look, the book is the Happy Home Loan Handbook, and literally Paul and I were talking about this. Is like, look, mortgage brokers don't seem to have a voice. Buyers agents, financial planners, I think definitely have really strong voices, especially that authority space in the books. But when I was turning to Paul, I was like, mate, look, home buying hasn't changed for 50 years. Like the art and the science of buying a home, especially your first one, that hasn't changed. And the credit policy may move a little bit, for example, but the idea of going to a home, making an offer, getting accepted, getting a loan approved, and that's how the book's kind of broken down, how to get your loan approved, how to buy your dream home, and how to get on with life. I feel that's the part that a lot of people just forget, which is when you're home buying, life comes to an absolute standstill. Like your whole life revolves around it. Open homes, contracts, conveyances, auctions, missing out, and this whole emotion. There's probably a testing time as a couple. I won't say young couple because you look at the median first home buyer age, it's 37. And that's
Is it 37 now, is it?
Yeah,
God.
that's the average.
Yeah.
So you think there's people, I know, obviously being in broking, I see firsthand people that are much older, and then there's people that are younger that are getting into the property market. So for me, I was condensing down a lot of those conversations that I know have landed, success stories, case studies, putting that into a book, because first home buyers are so hungry that when I talk to them one-on-one, they can't retain any of the information because it's just so much coming at them. A book is something where they can just, at their own pace, absorb that information, come back with a better heightened level of understanding of the process, and then we can in turn have better conversations.
Yeah, I like chatting with mortgage brokers, and for those people who tune into me on the Spark Property Investment Show, I speak to brokers regularly. I'm a shareholder in a broking company because I believe in them so much, Finney Mortgages. So I don't want to give you too much of a plug because that's the second best mortgage brokerage in Australia.
I'm happy to play second fiddle on that.
But what I would say though is it's a very collegiate industry, mortgage broking,
100%.
and you see really good brokerages have really good tight relationships with each other because now there's 70+% of all home loans written through mortgage broking. When I started knocking around mortgage broking, it was about 20%, right? So it gives you a sense for the consumer demand, rapid consumer take up of mortgage brokers, because why wouldn't you use a mortgage broker?
The proposition's strong.
It's great.
Naturally, we're biased, but when you think about it, the whole thing makes sense. But you take a sea of 18,000 brokers, and that's probably why you talk about that top echelon of brokers are really collegiate, and because they just we want to see each other do well.
But we swap notes all the time.
Mate,
you talk about I would talk even talking someone like Empower Wealth. Ben Kingsley. You swap notes. You go, what's going on? What are you seeing? What's happening? What are your clients doing? And what that does is cultivate a much better sense of shared collaborative equity in this sector of everyone driving towards the same thing, and that's getting better outcomes for Australians. Now, on the podcast to do with Paul, the Pure Property Podcast, we're very much focused around property investment and how you can actually use that as a mechanism for creating wealth. How do you actually go about changing your life through using property as a vehicle for doing that? And what that is, go back to Paul's book. I don't want to talk about it too much, but his sort of thesis or his position on that is, if he does property well, he gets to do what he wants to do, and that's surf more, right? Everyone's got something like that. It could be you want to garden more, you just want choice, right? So property is a mechanism for creating or cultivating choice in the future, even though you might not know what that is when you actually get there. So the purpose of today's chat is to really drill in and understand what you're seeing in your client base. I know you work with a lot of really good clients who across the whole spectrum, starting from first home buyers, and which is your book sort of originated through to more sophisticated investors, and I know you do some investing yourself. But just to get on mortgage broking for a bit, you win a fair few of our awards as well. I see. Yeah.
Again, look, I got two small kids, mate. They don't really care what awards I'm winning. And
do you come home with a bit of a bit of crystalware and put it up and go, I think, Dad's got another one up next to the ribbon for first in the running race.
Say, what are you guys doing, mate? You slackers, you 4 and 6 year old. But look. The awards, from my perspective, are a lag factor. They reward what you've done in the past. So to me, I'm like, you can't get hung up on it, but look how good we are, because it's rewarding stuff you've done in the year gone by. But I think it's a good chance, especially for the team and clients, to go, hey, look, we've been validated. We're setting a bar for ourselves, and I think that's what's important, because I'll speak to clients like, we're looking for someone who's hungry, they're growing themselves, either their portfolio, they're ambitious. I'm like, that's us. We just want to keep setting the bar high, not only personally, but professionally, property journey. And then within our team, we're going, hey, mate, don't sit still. Don't accept the status quo, onwards and upwards. And that to me is where something like that, awards or just some type of external validation really helps to give you just that pat on the back to keep going.
So the question is not, are you still enjoying being a broker? I think more the question is, what do you like about being a broker? Because it sounds like there's a bit of an altruistic connection there for you. Yeah,
there's so much about it, especially when I get someone they've been told no, and you turn that into a yes. Absolutely, that's hands down a real personal satisfaction. But for me, I see the impact that property's had on people's lives. I'm like, you never would have saved that type of money. And Paul and I were saying before, we've been going 10 years, And people that have been very, very early on the journey, see where they are now. And you talk about freedom and choice. I'll never forget, there's a client that we've got, his couple of investment properties, I'm happy to sell them. He's paid off his mortgage. And we're talking a Sydney mortgage, which is ginormous, paid that off. And now he goes to work with a spring in his step. His wife can stay at home with their 3 kids. And he's like, this is what we wanted. This is what, so property has given what they wanted.
It's the enabler.
Free in Sydney. They're taking a few more holidays, enjoying life, and he's got no stress, and he's in a decently high-powered role. But now he's going, look, how good's life? I turn up to work because I want to, not because I have to. And you never need a billboard for like the reason to invest in property and then use a vehicle to pay down your mortgage, because a 30-year mortgage and being a slave, that just doesn't sound right to me at all.
Yeah.
So how do you shortcut that?
And one of the themes we'll chat about today, but this is one of the greatest assets you have as a property investor is time. A lot of people get caught up on it's capital and deposits. Like probably the biggest asset you have is time, but time is finite, right? You can always make more money. You can't make more time. So those investors that work that out sooner rather than later are those which often get the best long-term outcome, but it's never too late. You can start investing in your 50s, your 60s. You're just going to have to change the strategy.
The strategy's different, yeah.
Strategy to deploy, and that's the reason why you need a really good broker and a buyer's agent. I spoke with a guy the other day, Paul, who you would know, and it sort of connected. Well, Aaron was saying Mitchell Burge on the Smart Property Investment Show, and he's an investor. We've known him for probably a decade or so. He's got I can't remember exactly the numbers, but he's got a great portfolio. He worked out that it's been making him $22,000 a week or so, $22,000 a week for the last 3. It's quite a big portfolio for the last sort of 3 years or so. Since the last time we got, it's ridiculous.
It's wild.
And he's going, I just can't. You're going, look, it's paper profit. It's not real money.
But liquidate today, and it's crystallised.
Yeah, there's some costs, but it's just going. How do you save that money? You can't.
You can't.
But back to your point, this story of. If you ever want a better example or case study of why you should invest in property and how it could be an enabler, it's that in general. I spoke with James Simon, who was the CEO of Aussie for many years recently, and he's saying the same thing. Like, it's similar to you, Aaron. Like this idea of they started that business on the basis of we want to get Aussies in homes, because if Aussies have the home sorted out and they've got their property and their finances sorted out, everything else is a lot happier. It's intrinsically connected with the health and happiness of most Australians and most Australian families, and I would argue probably the health and happiness of Australia. If Australians are happy with their property, you see it coming up the election now, things are a lot better. That's why you need a mortgage broker. Particularly an award-winning one.
Great circle back to the start.
Probably. So how do you guys know each other? Because I've known you for years. I've known Paul for years. I didn't really know that you guys knew each other pretty well.
I'd say Pete.
But have you got the connection there? Because I'm trying to think of where it was. I know there's about 4 or 5. I mean, the connection for me, probably more than anything, which is quite interesting, was we're both probably Westies through and through to a degree.
Absolutely.
And that sort of led to us being mutually connected to 3 or 4 other business owners at the time as well, who were sort of all starting out in various different spaces within the finance space. This is a decade ago. And I think we were all working with each other for a good period of time, because we were starting businesses and starting
complementary businesses.
It's particularly complementary businesses, but there's always things you learn really quickly. You learn in business how to start, what to do, systems, processes, things to focus on, things that are just a waste of time, where to spend your money, where not. But more particularly, the complementary component of how can you help my clients get to there and vice versa. And there was a good intertwined group.
It was I look back at it, we thought we were busy then. The startup phase, and that's where,
kind of like being a single out of university and starting your first job.
Where you spend a week on whether or not the logo was right. Now you just go
pontificating about font size and colours, and you look back and you think, man, I wasted a lot of time. But then you think about starting families, having kids.
That's great.
And all the other stuff. You're like, man, that levels you up real quick.
You know what? I reckon there's another connection here. There's another connection here which goes back probably another 10 years from that. And we're only chatting about it off air. And I think I've got this right. I went to university with your cousin a couple of decades ago, right? Yeah. And I think one of the original, when another mortgage broker we know very well, a surfing buddy, did a mortgage somehow for someone in your family way back then. The crab dinner that we had at Golden Century, I think, was connected with that, where we went, that was a good referral. You got to give us a crab dinner. I think that's somehow connected.
I don't doubt it, because when I look back, it's genuinely the web of.
He could have even done a mortgage for your cousin. I think.
There you go.
Okay.
Maybe I've got this completely wrong, but I think I could be right.
I'll find out.
I think I could be right. But anyway, so you guys professionally known each other for a little while.
Yeah, good decade.
Works well.
This space is so small, mate. You talk about bumping into people at the industry. Our worlds are very small, mate, especially when you get a bit of a reputation or name for yourself. You're like, oh, yeah, I know that broker, or I know that buyer's agent. And so while Sydney or Australia can feel like a big place at times, like the industry is very, very small. And those with a good reputation and sadly those with not a great reputation get known very, very quickly. So you got to live and die by that sword.
So hence the reason why you're not doing much work with Paul anymore.
I didn't want to say it.
Which way does that go?
So how do you guys work? You just got common clients? So it's like, how does?
Yeah, well, that's sort of where it all started. Is that we had. I mean, we intentionally, when I start. I mean, the thing. It's kind of like a fulfillment order scenario. If you picture ordering something via an e-commerce store from Amazon, where you have a client particularly who comes, typically they come to me at Pure Property Investment saying, okay, look, I'm thinking about investing in property, and our job first and foremost is understand their position, set a strategy. Part of a strategy always comes back to finance, borrowing capacity, structures of loans, etc. And then before we talk about which property, where, what and how, that fulfillment of finance had to happen. So early stages and for a very long period of time, and still to this day, my role was to then, okay, well, how do we facilitate that finance in the best way possible? Now, I'm not a mortgage broker. I don't want to start to dabble in what I think. I mean, I have an idea, but I also want to also make sure that is validated. And that's where a recommendation to Aaron and his team at Atelier, initially, that's where that connection started. And I think it was vice versa. Aaron might have the same position to say, well, here's what you can do. Here's what the finances say is possible. But what you actually buy and where you buy it is going to be a big determinant as to what happens in the future. And that's, that was the genesis of our relationship, but also of this conversation today, because that decision you make as to what to do with that money, man, the domino effect and where that can lead you to in the next 10 years, it can go amazingly and it can go the complete opposite way, and it can be very mediocre in between. And I think that's where our commonality between each other is that we found, okay, look, you probably need an expert opinion here before you go and make that decision. Even if you don't use them, I like to always say, get an opinion. Get an opinion of someone who has genuinely no interest in what you do with that money, or genuinely no interest in where or what you buy. But ideally, we want to make sure that there's not going to be a mistake made there. And then we ended up sharing literally dozens and dozens and dozens of clients over the journey. And out of that now, 10 years later, we've got literally dozens and dozens and dozens of stories of where people started and where they got to.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, and then you've got the other side of the ledger of people who we did speak to, said, here's what you can do, and potentially have unfortunately probably taken other decisions or done nothing in some cases.
Done nothing is probably the ones where I'd literally have some of my team and they look through our old list clients. I'm like, they start mentioning names. I'm like, I spoke to them.
And then you go back through the notes. And that's what we talked about, and that's what really we want to get to today is kind of what are the traits of genuine property millionaires, and what are the traits of people who have actually gone from that first conversation and have actually now led to your example earlier, Aaron, of actually now living a life of choice. And we're only talking 10 years. 10 years in property is a relatively short period of time, but you extrapolate that to 15, 20, 25
I don't know how happy I am with the term of a property millionaire, because pretty much anyone in property these days eventually,
Well, a property millionaire is $1 million in my
equity.
definition of net equity.
Yeah.
Is probably where I refer to. It's not $1 million in assets.
How many?
Nothing.
I know that's a vague question, but how many of them do you sort of have a relationship with in your business?
Property millionaires?
That would have $1 million in equity. Like, is it the norm? Because probably I would assume that if you're using a buyer's agent or you're dialed into a really good broker, you're probably a little bit more focus driven, and therefore you would see more than what would be reflected in the general population.
If I use numbers, I know we've probably worked on over 2,000 acquisitions in 10 years' time, and out of 2,000 acquisitions, we've probably worked with probably 1,500 individual buyers. Out of that time, if I look at it now, I mean, obviously as time progresses, those people, more and more of them become. I would probably say that a good quarter of our investor cohort are technically property millionaires on paper right now. Now, that usually is always going to be a direct result in how long they've bought for, how active they've been throughout the journey, and also still holding to this day. That's, for me, usually comes down to is time. But I would say a good quarter of active property investors that we work with go, and this is not talking about people who have had property prior to coming to us, but that's starting from the first purchase, potentially with 100% debt against that property, whether they've taken equity from a principal place residence or potentially used cash or whatever it might be, but gone from that to then actually technically having $1 million in net equity in their asset base. That's probably where it comes
It's
down
always
to.
really difficult to talk about property because what you see in social media is typically people's chapter 7 or 8 or chapter 10, whereas what we're talking about is most people, everyone starts at the chapter 1, right?
Yeah.
Where, so property investment and the product of property investment is directly correlates to time, right? So you can paint a picture at any point in time and just go, look at all these property millionaires, right? Well, they had to start somewhere where they weren't. So, that's why I asked the question about give me a sense of your cohort, right? So there's an argument to say all those people who are a client of yours today will be a property millionaire in the future because if they hold onto the property.
And this is what we're trying to give here is that the clues as to everyone has an aspirational position, and for most people that's different, right? Like having $1 million in net equity is not necessarily an aspiration for a lot of property investors, but it might be that I want to have a certain amount of income to then give me the choice of whatever I want to do at a particular point in time. But I think to your point, Phil, and we were actually just watching an ABC article on another buyer's agent colleague who we know well and who's been in the game for a long time, and not only as a very good buyer's agent, but also as a prolific property investor.
Yeah.
You look back at their story at their sort of their ground zero, it always comes back to they made that decision then.
Yeah.
And then they took that step to go there, and then they took that. But the ones who genuinely have made it, they always have a story where it comes back down to. And I was actually sitting down with my mum last night, and we were talking about it was actually talking about the cost of living crisis and property, and I think we talked off air again about that too. And I'm sort of diverting it, but I'll bring it back in a second. But it was talking about cost of living, and my mum talking about when she trained as a nurse way back when, and the fact that at that time she lived in a dorm with 5 other people, which basically was a shared kitchen, shared toilet, and she said it was squalor, and she was getting paid pittance, and it cost nothing to live there, but that was all she could afford at the time, and she basically ate cheese on toast and baked beans for a good 3 or 4 years as you go through your training, and then moved back home to then try and actually save more money while she started her career, and then ended up buying a property way out west for $33,000 in 1981, which is all they could afford at the time, my mum and my dad, which then led to that property increasing in value and held it over time. But I guess what I'm coming back down to here is to say, well, where does a cohort start? Well, they typically always start where they can afford, but the commonality is they hold. The commonality is they take action after they've bought, because almost every one of those people that I talked about that of our cohort of property investors, I could almost guarantee that none of them are property millionaires or net millionaires on paper from one decision.
So again, most of the narrative or commentary around how to be successful in property is based on the mechanics of it. And I'd say there's two parts to the balance sheet in your equity in your balance sheet. One is the mechanical aspects of it, the final aspects of it, and then there's the intangible or softer aspects of it, and that is mindset, decision-making capabilities. So I want to concentrate on the latter rather than the former, because you probably see it as well. So let's get beyond how to work LVR strategies and your income and all that sort of stuff. That's all a big part of it and super relevant. But to your point, you get these people come back and what did you end up doing? You've spoken about this 10 years. You're still going to do something. You've missed 10 years and time being one of the greatest assets you have. So on this side of the ledger, which is the intangibles or the soft skills around property investment, what do you see the best guys do, Aaron?
I say the property market rewards action takers and decision makers. I say that consistently because it does. And
so the
property market rewards action takers and decision makers.
Okay.
So you can have all the resources, you can have the best laid out loan strategy, you can have the best laid out property strategy.
Make a shitload of money.
Mate, if you do nothing, you get that you get those results. So, and it's funny, when I talk to our higher income earners, they don't pull the trigger as often as you think they would. And it's a little bit of complacency. And I've got a real call to arms around, strong income earners, because they think they're a little bit bulletproof, whereas probably they're more vulnerable than some of my lower income earners. And I'll tell you why. It's because those roles that they get are highly specialized and they're not easy to come by. So when you start earning, 200, 300, 400 grand plus, they don't think that they need to invest in property and buy, 500K properties because it's below them. They've got a lifestyle to live. And I'm imploring them to buy properties because that is their get out of jail free card. If the CEO comes in and makes their team or their role redundant, and it's very hard to then find a role without being out, and then they lose income because they're out of the workforce. Whereas when you're earning, with all due respect, when you're earning 60, 80, 90K, for example, you can potentially find another role fairly quickly at that end of town if you've got the right skills and the right attitude. But they're the ones that are more hungrier because they know that their income's capped at some point as well. So they've got to then find another source of income, i.e. invest in property, because their incomes won't be doing such heavy lifting, say, compared to a 200K income earner.
Yeah, it's really well put. And a lot of these people, they get to a particular age and they get the tap on the shoulder and saying, thanks for your service.
Absolutely.
You're too expensive now. We'll get someone younger in, and they end up normally becoming a consultant somewhere or retire early, right? Yeah. So, you don't want to be planning for that, but you've got to be conscious and prepared for it because it's inevitable for most. At that point,
mate, they've bled for their company. So they've usually parked their own personal ambitions aside and career ambitions have taken over, or family at that point, right? Kids are in private schools, do your obligatory holidays overseas, for example, got a lifestyle in terms of like cars and everything. So there's a lot going out, and an outward appearance. It's like, look at the home, look at the renos, and the clothes get more expensive. Whereas, and I live and breathe this, which is as my income has gone up, my lifestyle has got far more modest. And to me, it's a deliberate showing that I'm like, mate, my money's going into where you can't see it, which is into property. The car is getting worse as I earn more. And it's my way, it's my walking billboard to go, hey, mate, when others are zigging, you got to zag. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And it may be a very small cohort that I can preach that to, but the impact and the ripple effect starts to get bigger and stronger where people take notice of that as well.
Do people like you talking with them about those things, or is there a reluctance from them? Like, just going, mate, what do you know?
Yeah, but here's what I say. In 10 years' time, you'll be coming to me asking me how we did it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you while we're on the journey, this is how we're doing it. So don't come to me in 10 years' time because I probably want to work less at that point. So I'm telling you now, as I'm going through this journey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. I'm very open about my journey and our journey with Bernadette and our kids. I'm telling you, because in 10 years' time, when you come knocking going, how did you do it? I want that. I'm sorry, mate. I'm kicking my feet up and I'm enjoying the fruits of my labour. Financial choice where I'm like, I'm spending more time with my kids. And I'm doing that already, but I'm spending even more time at that point. I'm going to be working less and training my team up behind the scenes. So, yeah, it's a message that will resonate with people that are ready. And you talked about mindset. People have to be willing and wanting to receive that message in order to do something with it.
You see a lot of people, they see the result of people's hard work and decision making, and they want that. But what I found over many years chatting with property investors, a lot, if not most, of people aren't wired to do the decision making that needs to take place and be accountable to themselves in order to accelerate or propagate a good outcome in property. And by what I mean with that is a lot of people expect there's a reason why only a handful of Australians really become wealthy through property. They're driven, they're focused, they do it really well. A lot of people like the idea of it, but they're not able to hold themselves accountable to do it. So they try and offset or outsource that, and that's good. That's what I do. But you still got to be accountable to yourself to make the decisions with the people who you choose to help you on this journey.
Yeah.
And I make sure when I speak to my broker and accountant and buyer's agent and stuff, I make them hold me accountable to it because I go, this is what I want, get it done. They go, all right, we'll do that. I'm paying them money to do it largely. And they'll hold me accountable to it. A lot of people don't like that accountability.
The direction's coming from you. Whereas if they ring you and go, hey, Phil, hey, you know what, you can buy that next investment property. Like, yeah, good on you. Are you trying to sell me? And so automatically this like they're on the radar going, is this bloke trying to sell me another loan or another investment property from Paul, for example? It's like, actually, we're holding ourselves to account that you said that you want to go and buy 5 properties. We're delivering on this brief that you said to us 3 years ago. I want 5 properties at X portfolio value. We're honouring that. That's not a sales approach. This is us doing
that's
it,
what you've
living and
engaged
breathing
us.
what we said.
You've told me this is what you want.
Yeah,
We've strategically, you've got to be held accountable. And you've got to be comfortable being held accountable. A lot of people aren't.
This is it. And this is where you talk about the ones that have gone on to achieve, really strong portfolios. it's a two-way street. So the amount of times like, I haven't heard from my broker. Have you called your broker?
Yeah.
Give them a call. Have you heard from your accountant? Mate, give them a call. You know, every good professional is busy. Get back on their radar. That level of ownership, and we'll see this all the way through, and certainly it's not a rant, but you go, oh, mate, now I've got to go get independent legal advice because I'm buying through a trust, or, you know, self-managed if I'm going to get it set up and new company. I'm like, boo-hoo, mate. Like, you're buying your fifth investment property.
Yeah.
But these type of pressures are a real privilege. They're reserved for people in the top 1% of the property game. Take it, own it, get it done. And I think that's probably where we need to, like, if we want to really get these results, we've really got to get under the skin of some people and go, how bad do you want it? Because you'll come back in a few years' time and I had the ability to do it, but you never pulled the trigger. You don't get the results.
There's so many excuse merchants out there, right? It's like, oh, interest rates are too high, or the economy's not right, or the property market's too hot at the moment. I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting, like, you know, everyone's waiting for something largely. And this is another mindset thing.
Absolutely.
You know, you've got to be able to make your decisions within the bubble of your strategy rather than the collective bubble of what's all going on around you, right? And a lot of people really struggle to dissect the two things. I think most people struggle to dissect the two. People look for reasons why not to do it rather than to do it.
Yeah.
And that again is a huge mindset thing, right?
It's funny because we're just talking about, you talked about potentially high net worth, or not high net worth, high income earners being very guilty of this a lot, of being those non-action takers and non-decision makers, or pragmatists for the wrong reasons a lot of the time as well. And I can think of a client that we share and we've shared since day dot, and it sort of brought that to mind, who's an executive in pharmaceuticals and is danced around different roles, gone overseas, stayed here, and I think we've built together with him, you and I, and our teams, probably a portfolio of, I'd have to assume it's probably a dozen or maybe 8 to 10 properties now over time, and I think he just upgraded to what is to be probably his retirement home. And this is a man who's, and his wife as well, and kids and all the things, dog and aspirations within life to get to, but his mindset was, look, yes, I earn good money. Yes, I understand that there's a good pension for me at the end of the day. Yes, I understand I've got a share plan in my business or in the company that I'm with, and there is going to be some significant cash, but I want more than that. And I don't just want it for me, I want it for my kids, but I also want it for these reasons. And these reasons are very similar to what you just shared. And it's not to buy the newest Porsche. It's not to live deep waterfront for the sake of saying it's my show badge. It's to say I want to be able to spend time doing what I want to do, and that typically revolves around being close to the ocean. And he's a guy who's self-motivated. He took those steps, and I can almost guarantee in 6 months' time I'll have an appointment in my calendar made by him. I'll proactively reach out, vice versa. Yeah. And whether he's reaching out to you to get a health check on where his loans are, whether it's an equity release, whether it's now pushing to the level of saying, I can't get any more in my personal name, let's go down the trust, let's go down the SMSF pathway. Yeah. He's never used these things as reasons why he doesn't do it. He uses it as reasons why this is why we need to now take this next step. And his portfolio is unequivocally now into the multi-millions as far as net position. And that started from one investment.
Absolutely.
That started from one single investment. And granted, he had a principal place of residence with some equity in it. That's where it started. And that was basically 10 years ago, and now has properties in Brisbane, in Hobart, in Sydney, and I believe in WA, and potentially coming to soon to be in the Melbourne market as well. And, this is a multifaceted, diverse portfolio that started with one single purchase of a property that was circa $300,000 or $400,000 and has now led to a portfolio that's probably worth in excess of $5 million.
And we're talking 10 years, less than 10 years.
Less than 10 years, manage the cash flows. And, yes, his income allowed him to borrow, but I tell you what, he could have sat, and I've got very, very similar, more clients who sit on the other side of the ledger who are on very similar incomes, who say, I might just buy one to help me in retirement.
Yeah, one is not going to change the game in retirement, that's for sure.
That is the crux of it, is that one property will not do anywhere near the level of
I think
heavy
you're
lifting
kidding yourself
want.
if you think you're going to buy one or two investment properties and have a very comfortable retirement, unless they doing some insane heavy lifting from a growth perspective. And that's what we're imploring people to go. It's not buying quantity for the sake of it. You buy quality every day of the week. But that's what a portfolio is. A portfolio is on one or two, and that's unfortunate. It's a general statistic. What is it? 92% of investors, one or two properties. I think we'll definitely see that number nudge up. The prevalence of buyers agents, sophisticated now tools that have become mainstream like trusts and SMSFs as well. I think we'll see that number definitely increase. But even then, we're talking about super investors. I think super investors are called 20 plus properties, but then you've got this echelon of 100 plus properties as well. And I think they were reserved for, private bank ultra high net worth clients. And now, you know what? With the right team and the right strategy and the right heart and mindset, that is achievable for some people that never would have had that level of property ownership in their bloodline before.
You got to be hyper focused though to do that. Like that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, you're signing up for like constantly just signing up loan documents.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But again, you need to be one of those action takers and decision makers.
Can you imagine their kids or their grandkids, like beneficiaries of that? That's intergenerational.
Well, you see these stories now in the city. Like I think there was. Properties getting like Ultimo way where one family sort of owns 30 or 40 properties there. They bought them like years, like generations ago for nothing when no one wanted to live there. And now they've got like it's set whole families up like just with just rivers of money, like ridiculous, endless amounts of money, right? Because at some point in time, someone did something,
and they held. And then they held. And then they replicated when they could. Yeah. And they just thought,
and they probably did without a lot, right? Like, they probably weren't having the fancy lifestyles. And, I leave a pretty thrifty life. I don't really buy fancy stuff, because I don't need to, don't want to. But you see a lot of people, they blow all their dough, to your point, on overseas holidays and lifestyle type stuff, which if that's what you want to do, that's cool. And I always come back to the point, that's cool. You can do that's what you want to do it, right? It's hard to have both sometimes, but most people want both without having to sometimes do the effort.
Do you know what I think's a real tragedy here? And we've both worked corporate, right? I see people that are like senior level managers. I'm like, some of your direct reports that are earning far less than you are actually wealthier than you.
Hands down.
And you're slaving away. And I call this sweat equity versus property equity. Mm-hmm. They are earning more than you. Their wealth is more than you, but you're busting your chops, working long hours, never seeing your family, and someone's sailing past you because they've bought property, and they're literally not having to roll their sleeves up and work the long hours that you're doing, being a slave to emails and meetings and skipping lunch because you're super busy and not seeing your kids. That's what property can do. Like you can earn more than your boss or your boss's boss by buying property. Absolutely. And you're walking around in jeans and not having to walk around with like cufflinks and ties and go traveling and staying at hotels and traveling for work. That's what I'm saying. If you want to do that and you've got a gift for corporate and you want to earn, that's your way to earn, and it's your self-worth, absolutely do it. But then put that income to work.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you go down that corporate pathway and earn big bucks, which is cool, you got to remember, for every dollar you make, the tax man's got his hand out for a good chunk of it, right? Whereas
nearly half of it.
Whereas if you invest in that in property, yes, there's taxes connected with transacting on property, but as a wealth creation tool, it can be an enabler for a more tax-effective outcome along the way, negative gearing and all that sort of stuff. And you're going to have to pay some tax on the way out when you choose to liquidate or realise it at some point. But
that's a success fee, though.
That's a success fee, right? Like you better off. It's the quiet hand of property, which is the enabler of wealth creation for many people. Why? There's a lot of people wealthier than their bosses.
Correct.
Mate, it's funny. I brought that up. It brought me to my mind as we were going through this, which was a client of mine who, again, I've been working with for a good decade. And I distinctly remembered when we were having conversations a good 10 years ago, he had a property. He had bought his home with his wife in Linfield at the time. They had a bit of equity. They started their journey, bought a large block in St Mary's, and then that essentially perpetuated to a number of properties. And I bring it up all the time. I've actually had him on my podcast prior, and I'm trying to bring it up here because what I share with him now, and I won't be able to see it for the viewers, and I'll probably show everyone at some stage, but the reality now, that led to multiple decisions being made and property. This guy loves fishing. He's 50 years old. His wife's still working, but he was corporate. He was in a tier one construction company. He was mid to senior management and hated his job, did what he did to get an outcome to borrow money. And to your point, he basically said, I don't want to be my boss, and definitely don't want to be my boss's boss. There's a big paycheck attached to it, but I dislike what I do. I dislike the hours I put in, and I do not want to be here longer than I need to be. I understand what it's enabling me to do, but I get this money and I put it over here. And that was our strategy. And the strategy was within 10 years to get out of it. He's out. His wife's still working because she loves what she does. She's in the podiatry space, and I think she's got her own small practice. But now all I do, and literally we're done buying, and I'll show you guys this, and probably can't see it on the screen there. You won't be able to see names because it's probably not there.
Just fish pictures.
We just share fish pictures. So so literally,
That's awesome.
The words that we get is that fish in my lifetime. He takes random fishing trips to go to New Zealand to try and target a particular kingfish. That's all we do now. We do catch up to review the portfolio. We're not buying anymore. He sold a few recently to just pay down and just income. Again, his lifestyle, he lives in a nice house. He doesn't have things that he doesn't want. He doesn't own a boat. He goes and rents when he needs to. He goes and just goes on the charters that he wants to. He loves fishing, lives for fishing, but just doesn't have superfluous expenses. And he had this goal 10 years ago. He had an income. He didn't have an aspiration to want to leapfrog into the next role in corporate. He had all these people overtaking him, but he also, and this is it, ironically, I've now got a couple of his old bosses who he doesn't work for anymore, who have actually since engaged us to say, had a chat, caught up with William a couple of months ago, and he's, obviously he's not working, and he's explained how he made his money, and these people are coming here, and they're a bit frantic because they're now getting further into their career, and they're like, I don't have that long, and I'm like, fuck, I've just come to the realization that I'm in a bit of a pickle here, and I'm like, at least you've come to that realization, because now it's action time.
I call it a bit of a Stephen Bradbury effect. I don't know. Like,
absolutely,
there's those that are working absolutely hard. This bloke just sails in, and that's what property can do. It is an unfair advantage. I look at people that have invested much longer than me. I'm like, mate, I'm bloody busting my chops here when I started out broking, working insanely long hours, and that's what I say. You take property equity. I bought one. It's done $100,000. I don't know, in about 4 months, right? For me to earn $100,000 or to pull that out of the business, for me to pull $100,000 out, I'd need to probably have an extra team member on. That means I've got to onboard, recruit, whatever, train. Then I've got to manage the cash flow to then eke out $100,000 and then pay tax.
It's the quiet hand. It really is the quiet hand.
$100,000 is the average. That's the median income. Yeah. Right? So you take a median income that's taken you 3 or 4 months to earn through property growth versus sweat equity. Yeah. Geez, mate. I just don't know what billboard people need to read or see to take action before it's too late.
When's too late?
Too late is when you're making decisions that are short, they're shortcut. I need to do a development, or I need to do a quick flip.
So it's not an age thing necessarily. It's more of a.
They're trying to either they're trying to compete. It's like I need to quickly move, or it's like I need to buy 4 properties in 4 months, or something silly like that, where it's like you're not thinking clearly about this. Like Paul's saying, you buy the right asset where you can, what you can, hold, then you choose to either use the equity, go again, or then you sell it at some point when it's hit that sweet spot in your portfolio. So these are time-tested, tried principles that have helped numerous buyers agents, numerous investors to build sizable and healthy portfolios.
Is that you talking as a property investor or as a mortgage broker?
Both.
Because mortgage brokers, let's talk about advice for the moment. For you mortgage brokers can't give advice on property, but they can give you conceptual ideas of how property works and how finance is connected with it. You can give advice per se on what's the right loan structure and you make recommendations on loan, and you're regulated under best interest duties.
But I'm PIPA qualified as well. So for me, I got to.
Oh, you're a property investment advisor qualified.
Mate.
Okay, so you can actually give advice.
I can give the advice. Again.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
It is, and so that's something you may not know. I don't advertise that, and I don't cut into the buyer's agent space. It's just not a discipline that. You got to stay in your lane.
Yep.
Yeah. But for me, I don't want to sit on the fence. If someone's coming to me to do their broking, mate, I'm going to give you, call it my opinion, a little bit of advice, for example, guidance, but you're actively seeking me out. I'm not going to sit on the fence and go, hey, you tell me what you want to do here. I'd hate that if that was my accountant. Yeah. I'm coming to you for advice and guidance. Lead me. And so I think that's what you need as a broker. You need someone that has that level of confidence. I'm recommending this bank, and here's why we're doing it. Imagine just going, oh, you tell me which bank you want to go to. That's not active broking.
I can give an example, and sorry to cut you off, Phil, but I'm working with a client who's considering engaging our services right now. And I've set out a very, very clear strategy for him about a week ago, and I've been trading emails back and forth on what I sent to them, and they've been asking additional follow-up questions. And their context is they're someone earning $250,000 a year, they're in a good job, renting in the eastern suburbs, pretty classic, mid-30s. They've inherited $700,000.
Nice.
They literally have it there sitting in cash. They've had that money sitting there for 2 years. They've been earning this money for about 5 years. They've been thinking about it. He said, he's like, I'll put a little bit of money in ETFs. When I say a little bit of money, about 70 grand in ETFs, because he's like, oh, I want to get a little bit of a return there. The money's sitting there in an interest savings account. Fine, it's 4.5%. It's not going nowhere, but it's certainly only just really keeping up with inflation. But in that time, he's looked at it, he's pontificated, and I've sent a strategy which included 1, possibly 2 properties to start with. You can imagine from your math would be immediately like, look, you could do a large number of things with where you're starting, and most people don't have either the cash or the borrowing capacity. You have both, and you have time. But he's coming back to me with the questions about, and the strategy I've sent is, here's the 2 markets that I'd suggest. Market A is probably 2/3 of the way through its growth cycle. Now, you'll probably get 1, 2, maybe more 3 more years of growth from that market, and that'll probably take an asset from potentially 700 grand to maybe circa 850 in that time.
Is that Perth?
Potentially.
Sounds like it to me.
However, or option B is a market that's probably at the very bottom of its cycle and won't see growth, maybe for another 2 or 3, 4 years. But you can bet your bottom dollar that you're not buying in a market that's overinflated. Now, yes, more patience will need to be preserved to actually get to the outcome there. The reality is you could obviously do both immediately. And he's coming back with questions saying, why would you recommend a market that's 2/3 through? Well, his context to me is that he wanted to get immediate growth. And I'm trying to go back to say, well, A, you don't need it, because you've got more than enough cash on hand to perpetuate a portfolio. So most people need immediate growth if you want to accelerate a cycle and you have a very limited amount of money to work with up front, because if you buy that first property and you're priced out for the second and you're relying on equity growth to actually facilitate deposits.
So this client might be listening to this, so no disrespect to them. Do you sit there and just go, I don't want to really work with someone like, because I want you to take ownership to interrogate my advice.
Phil, and that's where I go back to them, because I usually give a fair bit of my time to these conversations. Because, to be fair, they haven't paid me a cent to give this opinion, and I have no bias on which way they go, but I have a preference because I know where the outcome will probably lie for their situation, and I do give them enough time. But eventually, if they keep coming back and they ask the same questions, then I'm like, there's only so much I can put on the table here to say, here's my advice and my opinion, before I'd go back and say, you're probably not best positioned to work with us, because I know full well that if you do buy in a market and they get rapid growth in 2 years, they'll say, thank you, that was a great outcome. But in 5 years, when that market plateaus, I'll say that was a terrible decision. And conversely, if they buy that property which doesn't do anything for the first 2 or 3 years, I'll say there was a terrible investment. They might sell prematurely, and then 7 years later, when they look back, they say, well, you bought me a crap property, or you recommended a crap area that didn't deliver. But I said, well, ultimately, you need to understand that regardless of what decision you're making, if you're buying for a 2 or 3, 4 year outcome to get this really quick return for whatever reason, in my opinion, in general, property is not the avenue for anyone who thinks that you plough money into a market, 2 or 3 years later, you look back and you're like, I've made an amazing decision.
And this is the issue that I have with a lot of the noise around property investment at the moment, is that people are sold that is the norm and that's what you can expect in property investment. That's not the case.
No way.
Some people may just, absolutely to your point, get lucky and crack it and do whatever. That's not normal. Property investments it's directly correlated with the time that you're in a market on the basis of buying good investments. But back to this particular client, I always say, if you're going to go down a pathway as a property investor of being a successful property investor, whether I'm a successful property investor, it's open for discussion. But you've got to be a good client, right? You've got to actually, like, if you're smart enough and where you have the right mindset to go out and engage people to help you do this, you've got to be accountable to yourself. And the people that you work with, you need to instruct them so you get the best outcome you want. But they don't want nuisances, right? Like if you're sitting there questioning everything and justify it. Most of the time they'll just go, look, you're not right for me, go away.
Yeah.
You know, it's never happened to me. I know I piss a lot of people off. But you need a self-awareness to actually be good to work with, because the people, like you're showing, I can't remember his name, Mike or whatever.
William.
Like, William. Yeah. Like you obviously have a relationship there.
Absolutely.
Right. You know, and you're there, you gauge, you're connected, you're sharing photos. It's a good, warm relationship.
Yeah.
If you're using professionals to help you be successful in property investment, you've got to be the person they want to talk to and hang out with. Otherwise, numbers going to come. They're going to go, I don't want to talk to this person.
Yeah.
I just don't want to. Sorry.
Well, I know what
you miss
conversation's about to be.
You need self-awareness. You don't want someone berating you all the time, going this. Go away. Yeah. Go away. Well, it happens in mortgages as well. Like and I'm conscious.
I think to Paul's point, I think when they start questioning, but I've never heard of this bank, for example, mate. If you think you're buying a loan, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I'm like the anti-mortgage broker in that sense going, I don't know, mate. Like the loan's the loan. It's simply the vehicle to buy the I don't care what name the bank is. I don't care what the rate is. Just get the loan, buy the property increases in value, switch banks whenever you can, because when you're buying something, you have to then like change it. Like think about buying property. There's stamp duty, there's agents fees, whatever it is. Buying so with a loan, you just change banks, mate. Like it's effectively you're just renting the loan. You're not buying it. You're just renting it. So it's so interchangeable. What are you getting hung up about it for, right? So that's where I'm like, and I can't articulate that clearly. Where people go, oh, I can see it. That's me in my professional sense, just going, mate, this loan is simply a tool to go and buy property, borrow as much as you can, go and buy as much as you can within reason. What's the problem here?
It's a piece of utility, the home loan. Like,
hey,
I don't want home loans. No one wants a home loan, right?
But AGL, I don't know who the next energy provider is. Do you actively look at who's providing the gas to your house? Like, man, I just need gas in my house. I don't care who's providing it. Just get it done.
For the cheapest rate possible.
Right,
Yeah.
cheapest rate possible. Same with internet and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's just a utility, mate. The loan is simply that.
So you must get the sort of the inverse of what Paul has in his business. But someone goes, I come to a mortgage broker to get the best rate, but you've recommended this product here with this bank I've never heard of, and the interest rate's so many basis points higher than this one over here I've seen on the internet. Why can't you get me that?
Yeah, because they're giving you $200,000 more borrowing capacity. That $200K is going to get you to better buy. Maybe it's another asset, or it's not on a main road. It's an extra bedroom. You don't have to renovate it. Yeah. It's got better specs, for example, better aspect. There's all the reasons why. And so
at that point in time is when you go, this person doesn't get it. I'm not going to service them as a client because it's just too hard.
And that's the challenge. And I can't save the world through mortgages, right? For me, I'm like, I can only work with people that are subscribed to our philosophy. The philosophy is buy property. The loan is simply the vehicle or the tool to do that. And if you subscribe to that, we're going to get on just fine. Now, stress test me, ask the questions why we're going this bank specifically for a policy, whether you've just got your ABN registered or you've just started a new role and you're on probation. Yeah, we're driven within the confines of bank policy, for example, your bonuses or commissions or whatever it's got to your scenario or your situation. But when you're an investor and you're just trying to pull the lever on like, let's go acquisition, and maybe it's speed. You want to move on an opportunity pretty quickly. Or the other one is valuations. It's like, hey, mate, that bank's valued your property up 150 grand better than the next one. Like, strip that equity. Let's go again. Who cares about the rate? And the fact is, once you release the equity, it's sitting there fully offset. So the rate is actually irrelevant at that point because you're making zero repayment. Yeah. And this is such new concepts for some people going through it, they've been conditioned so much that you're buying a loan on a rate that it's to shift that. That's years of marketing drummed into them from banks. For me to swan in and go, don't worry about it, it sounds a little bit rich. And I can only work with so many people at that point to go, they're bought into our philosophy.
Hence why you wrote a book, mate.
Hence why I wrote a book. And hence why
a happy home loan.
Yeah.
A home loan's happy? I didn't know they had a personality.
They can,
mate, I'll tell you why they're happy. And this is
I want miserable home loans.
And
Yours would be.
That's the Aussie, I think, spirit in us going, oh man, bloody got to go to pay the bank, owns my own home. Mate, did you know if you're fortunate to be approved by a bank, you're in a certain percentage of the population that actually gets a loan. So banks thought of you highly enough to give you a loan that you can borrow. But the home that you've bought now means you're not renting, means you can add value, means there's equity in there to go and buy an investment property, gives you the security and stability that your kids aren't going to have to pack up and move every 6 months once you settle into a school. You get to be part of a neighbourhood. Mate, I'm telling you, the best loan I've got is the home loan, because where we've bought and the neighbourhood that we're bought into and the lifestyle that we have, I'm telling you, mate, it's worth every dollar. I was variable the entire time those rates went up. I'm like, who cares, mate? I had to live somewhere.
Absolutely.
I'm going to live here.
And this is one of the issues, it's probably for another time, but the fact that a lender will lend you money means that you've presented a proposition which satisfies their criteria, right?
Totally.
The issue we have in many ways in Australia today is that this idea of this entitlement that everyone should be able to own their own home, right? A lot of people will never own their own home because a bank is never going to lend them any money. Like, that's the reality of the world we live in, So that's the third of the population largely that rents.
And
right?
renting is a mindset.
Renting is mindset. You know, people do it for a purpose of investment, but there's everyone else that has to rent, like because they can't borrow money, and they might not be able to borrow money because they don't have stable employment. They might be a gig economy worker. They work 4 jobs on apps. They might not have any deposits. Like this is never spoken about in when you see it in the media or within politics or in the chamber down in Canberra. No one's sitting there going
offensive conversation to have. Going,
but it's reality, right? Yeah. It's reality. Yeah. Like we need property investors to provide the accommodation for the people who banks won't lend money to. There's a reason why.
And, and that will always be the case.
It's always going to be the case.
That will remain. And there's always going to be certain cohorts of society who, for whatever reason, can't qualify for a loan. The system is set up to lend, and especially in Australia, I mean, we need to be quite gracious in the sense that the system is set up to effectively provide money to people who are responsible borrowers.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And that is why our property market has been so robust for such a long period of time. And to start to tinker with those edges, I mean, we've probably bandied on a bit about APRA's 3% handbrake and essentially buffer they've applied. But you know what? Through COVID, that probably it showed that it was it's
largely
valid
bulletproof,
tool.
right? It's largely bulletproof. And within property investment, there's a property investment podcast. We're very fortunate as property investors because that's the nature of the way in which Australians live, right? A third of people rent. It might increase over time, just the nature of the beast, right? But there are 2 really important stakeholders as part of this equation as property investors. Number 1 is the Australian government. Number 2 is the banks. And we have some of the strongest banks in the world. There's good governance. They're largely bulletproof. Yes, there's a lot of hassles around trying to get debt. You've got to qualify. Yes, there's buffers in place. But they're a really strong partner. They're a partner. They're stumping up part of the dough.
Yep.
And the other partner is the Australian government, who wants Australians to thrive and prosper and have homes to live in. And structurally, the tax system supports that.
That's exactly it.
So you're not investing in isolation. You've got partners like Attilia Wealth and Pure Property on the tactical and strategic side, but then you've got structural support in the system.
Yep.
We're singing to the choir, aren't we?
Yeah.
Hopefully
we're preaching to the converted, and that's where it just kind of, I guess, galvanizes their plan to go, mate. If you ever need that billboard, I mean, you and I run businesses, 3 of us, and you just go, how you don't want to say the system's stacked against us, but how hard you have to work.
Is it stacked against us? I reckon it's all behind us, right?
Small business.
Tailwinds.
Yeah, small business,
yeah.
right? You've really got to persevere, push. The failure rate is very, very high for small business, and those that it is survival of the fittest. Versus property investing would have a much higher success rate if you just held. Like you can't just hold on to your business for a couple of years and hope it does well.
6 years you make money. That's the averages in property. If you are genuine.
So you got to have skin in the game to get in the market, whereas you can't have skin in the game in business because just simply showing up is not enough.
It's a lot more forgiving property investment as a wealth creation tool than being a business owner. Absolutely. If you get the fundamentals of it.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of business, small, medium, large business owners who listen to this podcast. I know firsthand because they've contacted me many times over. But I mean, business owners in themselves know firsthand how hard it is to run a successful business, but then use your business numbers to then display correctly what a bank's going to need to see to then actually use that money. We talk about corporate and medium and or mid-tier and senior executives within corporate and how much easier it is. And back to that's what frustrates me probably more than anything. If you're in corporate on a good gig, you are as best positioned to borrow money as anyone can possibly ever be. But then on the other side of the equation, if you're a small, medium, large business owner, I mean, props to you for getting to the point of actually having the funds ready to go. But man, I tell you what, to get money out, if you're ready to go in that space, for me, that's even more a call to arms, because if you have the ability to access funds from your business and actually display financials that allow you to borrow, the risk in business is so exponential. And the only good thing about running a business is you get to choose the 80 hours a week you get to work, right? That's the only benefit that I have in life. And you think, I take Fridays off. I do. But I tell you what, I work freaking most other hours, and so do you, Phil, so do you. And like, we talk about we spend time, but we choose where we put that time. And then we go back to the desk, and then we go back on the phone. And part of that has to be a payoff, right? And the payoff for me personally is I plow that surplus into property.
If you're self-employed and you listen to this, how often then you start to build your business, you show some profit, and the bank then comes knocking, going, how much do you want to invest back into your business?
Oh,
yeah. How much debt? And we've been guilty of this, mate. We did a couple of acquisitions. Like, right, seems like a great idea. And then it's more sweat equity. And this is where that whole notion came. I was like, geez, mate, this sweat equity. And then when you go and buy a property, it's like, I had to not even lift a finger, and that property increased in value versus being so active and hands-on.
It's a lazy man's
you talk about
business.
Mitchell Burge, right?
Yeah,
You talk about these people that you refer to, and like made $20,000 a week for the last 3 years and runs his own business.
Can you imagine a business that does that? Like very few,
Passive.
very few business without your cogs increasing.
Yeah.
Right? Most of our businesses are people businesses. So to employ and hire, love employing, love hiring, love managing. That's great. It's a real privilege. But at some point, there is diminishing returns because ongoing costs.
The cost of goods sold
Yep.
in property investment, if you want to talk about sort of P&L type discussions around, and property investment, we're sort of going a bit longer. I'm happy to go a little bit longer.
Yeah,
if you want.
absolutely.
You know, property investment is a business, right? And for many Australians, it is the great Australian side hustle.
Absolutely.
It's the best.
It is the
biggest
best.
ROI,
If you've
hands down.
got a job, a PAYG, it's the best side hustle you can do is property. It's not drop shipping. It's not driving an Uber. It's not having a craft store at the local markets. It's not investing into a hamburger joint with some blokes.
Active all those. You just
all
started
active.
Off, everything is active there. It takes you either buying that all before, and then you've got to sell it.
Yep.
So you've got this entire COGS ecosystem that you've got to manage and profit margin, which is an outlay. Then you've got to think about how I'm going to move this product. Versus every year on year, you're going to get rental increases.
Yeah.
Every year on year, you're getting tax benefits, for example. You can move into the property and sell it CGT free at some point if you wanted to, whereas you can't do that in our business. Like, we're going to sell it. I don't pay a massive tax bill.
It's just it's so predictable. Cost of goods sold, COGS. So this is the expenses you need to apply to a business in order to conduct the business, right? Interest, land tax, accounting fees, water rates, property management fees. There's probably about 10, and it just won't change from that. Like now, what might change is the cost of those. Interest rates might go up and down, and things fluctuate a bit. But it's so predictable and easy. If you set yourself up administratively, you can manage quite a large portfolio.
I agree.
Right? It is the great Australian side hustle. But people sort of get stars in their eyes and chase other ideas, seeing what they see on the internet, right? Get stuck into it. So you can actually be a business owner in Australia in largely a foolproof business, property investment, without betting the farm, right? That's what you should be doing as a PAYG employee. And if you're a small to medium business owner or a large business owner, make your money in business, parking and property. It's an old adage that's stood the test of time. You do the same thing.
How did you reckon you got started in business? I reckon I pulled equity from my property.
Absolutely.
I had to be property
That
backed
was
to
the
start
only
my
way.
business.
That was 100%. So I documented it, I think, in my first book, is that I basically...
My first book.
but in all honesty, I mean, I know I spent 7 or 8 years in corporate building my own property portfolio, and I got to the point where I did one big equity extraction because I wanted a buttress to say, you know, and I wasn't going to, my mind, I wasn't going to fail, but I'm like, well, you know what? I need money to fulfill life, because starting a business, I can guarantee anyone out there, I mean, it's very rare you start a business that's immediately profitable. You have all kinds of stresses, fear of no one picking up the phone, fear of nothing happening tomorrow. You need money there. And that came purely from me having a relatively large portfolio before I quit my corporate job, extracted that equity because I showed that I had an income. And then obviously from there I said, okay, look, I've got money there. Here's the risk we're going to take. Let's go and do it. Money sitting there available. And essentially it was just a low interest credit card. Yeah. That's effectively what I had available to me, but I had a lot more cash than I could get available to me than I could from a credit card and at a lower interest rate.
And I see business owners that are locked out of the property market for so long because their businesses are not profitable. And you go, the opportunity cost that comes with that. And then when businesses go on to make big profits and then they go and buy the machinery, they upgrade mate, we're victim to it. I've been open about our journey. We bought the big commercial site, going to make it our next broker headquarter. And that locked us out of the property market for so long because I had this giant commercial debt, for example, and then the fit-out cost that came on top of it. Maybe we could have bought, I reckon, 8 investment properties in that time for that relative cost. Now, we were talking before, mate, that will come good once it's completed. We've got tenants in there, and we'll eat a bit of glass for call it the next 12 months.
Have you done the fit-out yet?
Not yet.
I've got a guy.
Oh yeah, you certainly do got it.
I've got a guy.
He knows the guy.
Yes. Does he know the guy?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know the big dude.
I've got a guy.
You've got a guy for most things.
Yeah.
But I look at that as like, again, we just fall into the trap as a business owner. I'm going to keep that's not the goose that lays the golden egg. It's property, and it's quite often you can get the banker's going to come back to you. You're doing pretty well in business, and
does your bank call you up trying to get you to take on debt products? Do they?
Oh, I mean, this is my world, right? Yeah. So they're constantly just saying, look, here's what, and we're around it because a lot of our clients are self-employed. So it's like, here's the latest self-employed. And, that segment was, I feel like, so underserviced years ago to the point that now they're rolling out policies for self-employed that I'm like, they're whiz-bang policies that are
for resi mortgages
and commercial.
for resi and
calls
commercial,
from my
only for
banker.
property or just commercial finance in general.
No, everything.
Like cash flow lending and all that sort of
Cash
stuff.
flow. Small business that, you had to show 2 years worth of tax returns at the start. Now I'm like, you could just show pay slips and just show you getting, and you look like a PAYG employee. It's like, you just give me a notice of tax assessment. We don't even need to set tax returns. It's like, they are some very lenient, easy policies. And if you want to pay a little bit more.
Banks want to lend money, right? That's how they make
How
money.
many calls do you get from your private banker or your business banker?
Never.
I get none. I feel for completely underserviced.
Mate, if you want debt, I can help you out with it.
Look, but I'm the one going to them. I've got a big development deal that I'm trying to get through now, and I know like the amount of things that I'm having to proactively go to them about. And this is not the first deal that I've done with them. And my banker, if you're listening to this, and I think
Do we share the same banker?
We do. We definitely do. And they've worked for the NAB, and NAB have been very good to me.
I've been very happy
They've
with
been very
NAB.
good. I'm not going
Yeah,
and I actually have been very happy with my banker, but I do want you to proactively come and buy me a coffee and ask me what I'm thinking about doing next, because I'm the one who has to go to them.
Yeah.
That frustrates me now because I've heard Aaron's there getting swindled.
I never get. Occasionally, American Express will call me up saying, you want
I'd be weary of those calls, mate. That's for sure.
I never never taken on debt for business, which is quite a nice position to be in.
Well, it's not for
but-
business, but like he knows that my business is property, but also my property business, anything that I can use from that, I reinvest in property. I mean, I'm certainly always trying to reinvest in property.
Didn't we do a podcast on this once?
I think so. I think we talked about getting him on here. Actually, I'll reach out to him after this.
Does his name start with A?
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
okay. Yeah.
We're going to get him on here.
I think I've spoken about him on the podcast. He's a really good guy. Good
He'd love
banker.
coming here because he's got some really, really good stories with small, medium, and large businesses and how these people have done.
Didn't
really
you have
well
like
in property.
Didn't you have and I think we spoke about this, so I'm not talking out of school. Didn't you have like a what do you call it? Like a line of credit to go out there and buy property?
I did.
Did you do anything with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, I did. That's all I
Gonna be
do.
asked twice.
I
That's all I
don't leave
did.
money sitting. If I've got lines of credit, I will move, and that's like I am itchy trigger finger. If I know that there's funds available, I can always look at property that I know is a good investment.
Yeah,
whether it's investment.
I probably sit somewhere between, like, I could be doing a lot more as a property investor than what I do. Like, I could be doing a lot more.
You need to get revved up more, I think, Phil.
Better,
Someone needs to push you out of that comfort zone a little bit.
Maybe, but I'm a simple man, simple life,
Simple pleasures.
simple needs.
Fried chicken, dim sims.
But I always enjoy having. A lot of people go, "Oh, Phil, who do you talk to about property and stuff?" I'm in such a fortunate position. I get to speak to people all the time about property, and it's such a great realignment tool for me. And I get every day a little knock and nudge in the right direction where I just go, I'm not really doing enough, and I'm doing a lot, right? You guys, know me pretty well. I've got enough, but it's a really nice thing to do. Is just to have that knock and alignment each time, and I get that because of what I do for a living. But there's no reason why you can't have that as any property investor, capitalising on the great Australian side hustle. Because if you surround yourself with the right partners and the right advisors, they'll do that knocking and nudging for you to keep you on track if you accountable yourself. And that's very much about what today's conversation was.
I would round it out. I know you were sort of open with it, Aaron, and that you explained, and it sounds like you've gone through a lot of different journeys within one over the last 10 years, right? From a property investor to a brokerage owner, building a business, scaling it, making some decisions that mean that you've scaled it back, scaled it forward, and oscillated a lot in between. But you're sort of looking at it now to say, when you talk about your lessons and trying to motivate other people, you're saying, look, 10 years, like you're showing people your journey, and you're saying, look, 10 years time, my intention is to not be doing what I'm doing in the same capacity. What does that look like for you? So I know this is probably more of a personal question, but I'm curious to know, when we've talked about our own personal journeys, and I think the reason why we still talk to each other on a regular basis and probably share these conversations really easy is I think we've probably got general similar philosophies in life. But so 10 years time, you've mentioned it's not about upgrading life. It's actually about trying to keep it modest to then get to the point of spending time doing X. But what is that, if you were to crystallize into a few things and say, here's where I'd like to work towards, or here's what I am with yourself and Bernie working towards, what are some of those major things?
I mean, we're very clear. We've got 10-year plans. So the business, when we started, 10-year plan, here's where we are. So I feel like the last decade is all about being business building.
Yep.
The business then gives us the income to then get the lifestyle that we require. The lifestyle that we require, then let's just put that into assets. Assets will then give us the ability to generate income. The income will then give us choices. That's how we've kind of worked out our wheel of wealth, if you call it that.
People listen to that, rewind that, and listen to that again.
Yeah.
That
and
little 30 seconds.
I'll tell you why, because most people use their income to go and buy toys like cars and stuff like that. I'm like, no, put your income to income producing assets and then enjoy the fruits of labor from those assets. So to me, within that next 10-year period, I mean, I'll take my long service leave, even though I'm a business owner, I'll take that. We'd love to take our family and spend some time in Europe. I'd love to do the Ashes for 2027. So that's
service leave.
Right.
I thought about
I know, right? I know, because I'm like, look, mate, I'm part of the business and I'm paid my dues as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sweat equity. So for me, I'll take our family, we'll do a Europe trip. And I think for us, I want to chase the Ashes and go Formula One over in Europe. So that's my dream. Things like giving our kids memories, like, you do the Disneyland trips. But for me, I'm like, that will come off the back of the fruits of our labor, which is from property. Building my team up. So, a good couple of brokers. I don't need quantity in the team. I've got quality, building them up. And the team are all buying property because I'm like, don't ask me for a pay rise. Go and buy property and build your wealth that way.
Yep.
Yeah. And then to me, the choice. So for me, I love training. So for me, I still want to be active physically. So I want to train. I love going overseas and training, for example. So I want to do more of that. Just like you guys love going on surfing trips. Yep. And so what happens is where I feel a lot of my friends in my network will have to be working longer hours because private school fees or lifestyle, that'll ramp up in the next 10 years as we're into our 40s, getting to our 50s. I'll go the other way. And look, would I like to buy a nice car? Sure. Sometimes I think the idea of actually being able to do it is better than actually doing it. I'll say this because I turned 40, bought a really nice watch. For example, I was like, that would be, and now I don't even wear it. I wear a wearable Fitbit type thing, And I think that was a really good lesson for me to learn, which is the material stuff for me doesn't count anymore. Yeah, I went on holidays and I bought literally all my clothes from Best and Less or Big W. I was like, mate, I don't care. The holiday to me was like, that was where the money was going. The joy on my kids' faces, the connection that I had with Bernie, the meals that we could enjoy.
Yeah.
We flew economy. I'm like, there's no bells and whistles. It's the time that we're spending together. And I feel like people miss that boat, which is they're so engrossed in like, it's got to be like first class or it's got to be like the U-Butte location or the couple's trip to the Maldives. I'm like, Bernie, my best trip would be somewhere locally where we just get to chill out and enjoy and talk and converse and read a book together separately. And that to me, so I don't know, like people that may resonate with that going, I want the experiences over the luxury tags.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where my heart is, and sometimes that the easy lifestyle, there's diminishing returns around wealth, mate. We've earned not a lot, and we've earned a little bit more.
Yeah.
There's diminishing returns around the wealth equals more happiness. And I'm just going, mate, I just want to chill out. I want to enjoy life. I want to live a longer life. I want to live a healthier life. What's the point of having 15 investment properties if you're getting a triple bypass done?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well said.
Very philosophical of you.
It is, mate. As I'm getting on in life, I find myself having more deeper, meaningful conversations,
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Again, you got to be accountable and responsible to yourself. No one's going to tell you what to do. You can get the right inputs to help you shape your decision-making, but only you can really work out how you're going to go.
And you got to run your own race, mate. Like if you're trying to buy property and Bernie says it, swing your dingling around and tell everyone, your heart's not in the right place. It actually should be something that's fairly secret, and you share that with people that are in your inner circle that actually want to know. I've got a mate he tells so many people. He's probably one of our biggest referrers in our business. He's telling everyone to go and buy property. He's like, did they call you? I'm like, no. He's like, mate, why don't they do it? Why don't they take action? I'm like, dude, they've got to want it for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, it goes right back to the very start of what we're talking about. We can have this great podcast, you can have this great information, you have some great brains around you, but if you do nothing with it, I'm sorry, mate, that's on you.
Well said. Well, thanks for coming in, Aaron.
Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it.
And Atelier Wealth, if you like what Aaron's saying, I'm sure it sounds like you're happy to help anyone, mate. So,
Mate, we just want good humans. We like probably what you guys are doing. We've got a good client base, but if you're hungry, you're eager, you want the right team, and you're a pretty chilled human, but you want some great results, love to work with you.
Yeah. Cool. You should bring one of your sort of co-clients in at some point. That'd be a good chat.
Yeah, we definitely. I could actually bring in the person we're speaking about. I reckon he might be happy to come on at some stage because he's got a great story which will probably resonate for a lot of people who should be doing something and probably aren't doing something, which I might try to make that a mission.
So other than telling everyone how good your book is and where to get it from, give me something meaningful to conclude this with. You guys ramping up, getting ready for Chrissy. You've got time in the calendar to chat to you?
I'll tell you what we're doing, and we do this time of year, the last quarter typically of every year, we try to reach out to our entire client base, and the entire region we reach out to our existing client bases. We do 12-month, 24-month, 36-month reviews, and we actually go through that. And it's kind of like our Christmas card scenario where we're saying, hey, haven't spoken to you for a while. That property we bought at XYZ as part of this strategy. Here's a current valuation on it. Here's probably where we see the difference of equity based on your debt. And we like to be it as a...
Is that your Christmas card?
That is our Christmas card, because technically, like every year that passes by, that Christmas card gets a little bit more enjoyable to look at, and it's not coincidence, it's time. But that's typically what we do right now. So my team are actually ramping up. I just had a text message as we've been live on air from one of my buyer's agents who leads this whole process, and we've now up to about 1,600 of these Christmas cards we're writing at the moment. It's a lot of work, by the way, but it's a very interesting part, and I guess for an insights for anyone who's listening as to what we do. It's not just buying the property, but it's then what do you do? Because a lot of the time people need that. Oh shit! I didn't realise that the price had increased, and there's some markets that are increasing rapidly.
So you're not the Christmas Grinch.
We try not to be. That's your job. but that is what we're doing right now. So the last quarter of every year, we spend a lot of time going through that, and really that's to give people a little bit of a, hey, if you aren't thinking about doing it, this is the reason why you should be thinking about doing something with what you've already achieved, and just trying to give people a little bit of kick in the backside.
What you should do is send a little elf on the shelf, but make it a little Paul Glossop, and he just sits up there on your mantle all year.
How would I move it every day?
Just watching you.
That's a lot of elves
just
to move.
watching you going, yeah, Paul's watching
He's
me.
done nothing.
What's he done?
I've done nothing.
What's he done? Is
he
done
I'm
good?
watching you do nothing.
Oh, cool. Anyway, how do people find you?
Purepropertyinvestment.com, 1300 98 5428 is the other way.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks for the time, gents. It's good to chat with people I know pretty well. You sort of get stuck into some good stuff, and you do your own podcast as well, don't you?
I do. Am I allowed to give it a plug?
Absolutely, plug away.
I think the Australian Property Investment Podcast is the one that I host. Again, same thing, mate. We bring on some great guests. I know Paul's been on there. Phil, been asking you, mate.
Yeah, come on.
Get you on there.
Mate, one thing I don't do is not a lot of podcasts.
Hosting. I don't think the tables turn on you.
It's the reason I don't like being asked questions.
Yeah. I do the asking around here.
Generally, life in general, I much prefer being on this side of the microphone.
That's why you're in journalism, mate. I do the asking.
Yeah. I don't like.
Notice this is his default position always. When someone's asking him a question, very defensive.
I don't like talking about myself personally. So
here's what I say to people like that. It's, hey mate, you got a story to share. Your story may, just without any tickets on yourself, your story may inspire others. And you've been in this game for quite some time. I remember when you guys were starting your portfolio out.
Yeah.
Starting out. And I remember you guys like knocking about out west, going out there on weekends and buying. It's crazy.
Good fun.
And everyone was going, are you guys nuts?
Yeah.
And I remember the start of your journey. Even me, I was going, mate, you're physically getting in there and doing some reno work. Yeah, mate, we bloody love it. And
get stuck in.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe that's it. That's your biography. Maybe that's it. Phil Tarrant, get stuck in.
Get stuck in. Just get stuck in. Yeah, okay. Well, watch this space, maybe. But thanks for tuning in, everyone. What was that? Australian Property Investment Podcast. Okay, all right, good. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
Ciao.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.